Welcome to America and Africa History, where we explore the deep roots, powerful stories, and legendary contributions of the Black race throughout world history. Today we begin our series, The History of America. But the story doesn't begin in 1492. Long before Europeans arrived, America was already home to thriving civilizations. America, a land of vast mountains and endless rivers, a place of ancient cultures, thriving cities, and civilizations that rose long before the arrival of Europe. A land whose history did not begin in 1492, but thousands of years earlier. This is the story of America, a story shaped by indigenous nations, and profoundly transformed by the arrival of millions of Africans, whose forced labor, culture, resistance, and resilience would forever alter the destiny of the New World. Long before the rise of cities, long before recorded history, the first humans reached the Americas during the Ice Age. The world was colder then. Massive glaciers covered much of the northern hemisphere. The first people crossed into the continent over 20,000 years ago, following herds of mammoths and bison across a land bridge that once connected Siberia to Alaska. They spread southward over thousands of years, through forests, deserts, and coasts, adapting to every environment. These were not primitive wanderers. They were innovators, hunters, artists, astronomers, and eventually civilization builders. Across two continents, these early peoples developed a mosaic of cultures. Some lived as nomadic hunters. Others created permanent settlements, villages, and trade networks. Slowly, the foundations of great civilizations began to rise. In the tropical lowlands of present-day Mexico, the Olmec emerged around 1500 BC. Their colossal stone heads, some weighing over 20 tons, remain a mystery and marvel. They pioneered early writing, mathematics, and the calendar systems that would influence civilizations for millennia. The Olmec laid the blueprint for what would become the cultural heart of Mesoamerica. Further south, the Maya created one of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth. They charted the stars with astonishing accuracy, developed advanced mathematics including the concept of zero, and built towering pyramids aligned with astronomical events. Their cities, such as Tikal and Palenque, rivaled the great cities of the ancient world. They were not a lost people as some claim. Their descendants still live throughout Central America today, preserving traditions thousands of years old. In the Valley of Mexico rose the Aztec Empire, one of the most powerful states in pre-colonial America. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, dazzled European observers with its scale. Canals, floating gardens, palaces, marketplaces, and temples touching the sky. It was a city more advanced than most European capitals of its time. Along the spine of South America, the Inca Empire flourished, an empire connected by 25,000 miles of roads and suspension bridges. They terraced mountainsides, built agricultural systems that still influence farming today, and engineered cities that have endured centuries. Their stonework, precise and earthquake-resistant, remains unmatched. In North America, near present-day St. Louis, rose Cahokia, a city of tens of thousands, filled with ceremonial plazas, pyramid-shaped mounds, and vast trade networks. This was the largest city north of Mexico for centuries. A reminder that North America, too, had powerful nations and urban centers. While civilizations thrived in the Americas, Africa, the cradle of humanity, was home to its own great powers. The Mali Empire, rich with gold, learning, and trade, commanded respect across continents. The Kingdom of Benin produced art so refined that Europeans struggled to believe Africans made it. The walls of Great Zimbabwe rose high above the savannas, testimony to complex African political and economic systems. Africans were explorers, traders, scholars, architects, and kings long before Europe cast its eyes across the Atlantic. This context matters, because the history of America, and particularly Black America, cannot be told without acknowledging the greatness and humanity of those who would later be forced across the ocean. By the 1400s, Europe was changing. Kingdoms were rising. Trade routes were shifting. And European monarchies began exploring the seas to find wealth, spices, and new lands. Spain, Portugal, England, France, and the Netherlands all sought power on the oceans. This drive for exploration and domination would soon bring Europe into direct contact with the Americas and Africa. The consequences would reshape the world forever. In 1492, Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean, stepping onto islands inhabited by the Taino and Arawak peoples. What followed was not a peaceful meeting of cultures, but the beginning of colonization, war, disease, and exploitation. Millions of indigenous people perished in the decades after contact. Entire nations were destroyed. Cities were abandoned. Cultures were scattered. Europe's arrival in the Americas marked the end of one era, and the violent beginning of another. As European colonies expanded, they needed labor, massive amounts of it. They attempted to enslave indigenous populations, but disease and resistance made this unsustainable. And so, Europe turned to Africa. What began as a trickle became a torrent. European ships sailed to the west coast of Africa, capturing or buying enslaved men, women, and children. They were transported across the Atlantic in brutal conditions, packed into ships like cargo. This was the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, one of the darkest chapters in human history. But the story of Africans in America is not only one of suffering. It is also one of endurance, creativity, resistance, and transformation. Black people would shape every part of the New World through their labor, culture, spirit, and genius. The ancient world of the Americas has now met the forces of Europe and Africa. In Part 2, we follow the rise of the colonies, the growth of slavery, the birth of Black America, and the rise of resistance. The story of America has only just begun. Do well to subscribe, like, and comment on the video as we look forward to Part 2.